Well, everyone, it's another happy day. We get to talk about another Nintendo console, and this time around, it is the Nintendo 3DS XL. Now, funny enough, I actually bought the 3DS XL before I bought any other 3DS, 2DS. Like, this was the first XL console I bought after the DSi XL, and I actually really like I love this console a lot. This is definitely my favorite Nintendo console in a portable sense after the Nintendo Switch. I think this one is amazing. I think the best design still goes for the DS Lite, but the 3DS XL with the capability and everything, this is my favorite console out of all portable consoles in second place. Obviously the Switch is number one, but I will say I think the DSi and DSi XL were the biggest improvements for the DS lineup for sure, but the 3DS XL came out a couple of years ago. It didn't come out yesterday. It actually was announced in 2012. It didn't get released until a little bit later than that. So this thing is pushing, I think, like 9 years at this point, which is so crazy. Next year it'll be 10 years. And I can definitely tell you, this console has aged extremely well. From the feeling in the hand, to the software, to the game selection, there's a lot of capability still behind this type of console that if you haven't purchased a 3DS XL, if you're in the middle, or if you don't think you want it, or you want something like a Switch instead, I will tell you, I'll be the first one to tell you, the 3DS XL still has a long life ahead of it. Even though it probably doesn't have, any more games coming out for it, the games that have already came out for this thing and the modding capabilities behind it are extremely awesome. And I will probably tell you, like, just buy it. They're not even that expensive. In 2017, when I bought this thing, I think this thing, I bought it for like $50, which is a pretty good deal in my opinion. They've probably gone down even more since then, but there's going to be a time where they're probably going to go up in value. We're kind of seeing that with some other consoles, so I guess we'll just see how it goes. But the 3DS XL, looking around it, first of all, the top, you had a couple of different color variations. So there was like blue, there was red, there was a black one. Me personally, I have the blue one. I wish I got like the black one or something like that, but this one's works fine too. It's okay. You have the dual camera setup up top, which is still so crazy. Nintendo was one of the first people to put like a dual camera on one of their devices, which is so crazy, but I really like it. Now, flipping it open, this is, I guess, the most impressive thing about it. On the top, you do have a 4.88 inch display, and it's a really big panel, but the smaller one is on the bottom. This one is a 4.18 inch panel, so it definitely is a smaller panel on the bottom than the top one. I like the 2DS XL because they kept it even on both sides. I was never a fan of, the panel being smaller up top or small on the bottom and vice versa, but I guess we'll just see. Well, it's not really that big of a deal. Now, one of the bigger improvements of the 3DS XL was the fact that they actually did increase the battery life by an insane amount. They say 86%. That may be the case. I did see that on my 3DS XL. The battery life was amazingly impressive. I was able to just charge this thing up one time, and I was able to make a ton of videos on this thing throughout a period of time. And I think that's a very impressive thing that this console had going for it. Now, continuing on with that, you can see that we do have on the sides of the display, we have the joystick, which I love. You have the D-pad, and you have the ABXY buttons on the right side. Now on the bottom, you do have the home button, the select button, and the start button, but you also have the power button on the side as well. And of course, up top, who can forget the infamous 3D button? I mean, this was one of the weirdest things ever. It was a toggle more so. And I've said this before, I was never a fan of the toggle. I never liked having the 3D capability. I just felt like it was very strange. It just felt out of place as well. I think it's cool and stuff, like if you want to utilize the 3D-ness and do something with it, but I've said this for years. I'm not a huge fan of what this 3D toggle brought. I am glad that they didn't bring it on a Switch and made it, corny in that sense. But I think for the 3DS XL, had it not been for the 3D toggle, it probably wouldn't have, been as much of a novelty. But I think that really persuade away from the games that this thing actually had, because this thing had a bunch of games out for it. But for some reason, this whole lineup of portable consoles, the 3DS and the PS Vita, just couldn't break the barrier. I think the PS Vita was more of a flop than the 3DS XL, but the 3DS XL, it just seems like Nintendo focuses on the weird things. This was around the same time the Wii U also came out, so take it as you will, but I think Nintendo at this time was just doing some really weird stuff, which I really never understood. Now that really pretty much covers it up on the outside. Obviously you have the battery on the back, micro SD or SD card slot standard, and that's really it. There's not a whole lot going on with this console, and I think that's a good thing. It's fairly minimalistic. There's not an insane amount except for that 3D toggle, but the best thing about this console was the software. I feel like still to this day, the software of these Nintendo consoles is the make it or break it. It is the thing that has, lasted the longest. And even when I still open up my 3DS XL and I look at something like a Nintendo Switch, there are still a lot of similarities, with the software. Obviously, it doesn't really, there's not much you can innovate on like gaming software, but there's a lot of improvements that I've seen over time. And on top of this, I don't know if this video is going to get demonetized now, but the modding capability I had with the 3DS XL was so insane. I was able to modify so much of this console. Is crazy. Now, there was one method, and I made a video about it, but I think I took it down because it got like copyright striked or something, but I was able to modify this thing. It was very easy. There was like some sound. It was the weirdest thing. It was like a WAV file, like a sound file that you play on your 3DS XL, and then it mods it or something. It was so crazy, but I was able to do it, and I was able to do a lot of stuff with it at that point, and it was a tremendous experience. I loved it. It was awesome, and I really hope if I get my hands on another 3DS XL, I can just modify it because it's a lot of fun. Now, do things legally, don't do anything crazy with it, but I had a good time with it, and I'm sure a lot of you will too as well. Now, with that, the games that this thing had, this thing didn't have a Game Boy Advance slot, but you could play, all those Nintendo 3DS games, DSi games, and standard DS games as well. So the lifespan and just the amount of games you could play for this thing is outrageous. You could literally play any game you want to on this thing, which is so insane. And as I mentioned before, that is one of my favorite things about this console. The backwards compatibility of this thing is amazing. Unfortunately, there's no Game Boy Advance slot, but at this point, I think it's totally okay. This thing came out in 2012, several years after the Game Boy Advance officially came out. So I think it's, okay, it's not really that big of a deal there. But the games that we had all those new Super Mario Bros, all those Marios, some Call of Duties came out for this game as well. We had a Super Smash Brothers came out for this console as well. I think some of you guys may remember that. And I think as a whole, the games of this thing are amazing. It's one of my favorite things. That it is the best thing about this console. Now, I will say, when you mod this thing, you do gain a lot more functionality and a lot more backwards compatibility, but the standard games that this thing can play is still totally okay in my hand. But the standard games this thing can play is totally okay in my standpoint as well. Now, that really pretty much covers it up for pretty much everything I wanted to hit on. Now, I do kind of want to, answer this question. Is the Nintendo 3DS XL still worth it in 2021? Well, this is pretty much what I'll tell you. I think the 3DS XL is worth it in 2021 in a way that, if you want to play these games, go for it. But also as a long-term investment, if you want to buy it now, resell it 5 years from now, it's probably going to go up in value in my opinion. It's kind of out there. I'm not 100% too sure, but I'm sure it probably will end up doing that. But on top of that, one of the more interesting things about the 3DS XL is just the games. The games you can play for this thing are awesome. It doesn't cost as much as a Nintendo Switch, and these things are available everywhere on eBay, on Amazon. I'll link one down below. As I mentioned, you can get it from there, help support the channel at the same time. And the 3DS XL, the capability behind it is tremendous. And I've said this for years now. If you buy a Nintendo 3DS XL, you're going to be getting a very solid console. Yes, it's probably not going to be as good or as future-proofed as something like a Nintendo Switch, but you're still getting a very current console. As long as you don't expect for this thing to play the craziest graphically intensive games. And, to be honest, this thing's probably not getting any more games coming out for it. If they are, then it's probably not going to be crazy. But I've said this for a long time. These consoles hold up extremely well. You pick up the first DS Lite, even the original DS, there's still a lot of functionality with that, to be honest. And the same thing goes with PSPs and all these other consoles. Any current gen console that's, still being made, PlayStations and all these other consoles, the previous consoles of them and even those previous consoles are still extremely awesome. Look at PlayStations, the PS5, PS4, PS3. The PS3 is still pretty decent. Xbox Series X, the One S and the 360 are still solid consoles as well. So take it as you will, but that's kind of how I see the 3DS XL. I think it's still completely worth it. I think it's a solid console. I just kind of wish that it wasn't succumbed to the 3D toggle. If it wasn't for the 3D toggle, I think this thing would have made more waves, but because of that, it was kind of looked at as more of a novelty than an actual console, kind of like the Wii U in a way as well. So take it as you will, but that's kind of how I see it. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys can hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my other channels. More importantly, everything, I'll follow every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.